The Tall Tea is a film that I saw in its first release. I must have been about 11 years old or something. But we knew there was something special about the picture. It had a toughness, a flintiness, so to speak, and a spareness that made it unique, particularly with the relationships of the characters, and Randolph Scott's character and his relationship with Richard Boone. Budd Boetticher came from actually the world of bullfighting. And at this point, I mean, I guess he's known primarily for making Westerns, but 3 of his best pictures are about bullfighting. The first one, The Bullfighter and the Lady, which was just restored into a longer version, which is a masterpiece. The Magnificent Matador and Aruza. And the starkness that I saw in Tall Tea, this reflects for me the starkness of the arena, the formality of the confrontation in which there are rules of conduct and honor. And this is a big part of the renowned series of Westerns he did with Randolph Scott. Now, of course, you know, Randolph Scott must have had an influence over these films, and so did Harry Joe Brown, the producer, and they had a very long, interesting career beginning in silence. And Burt Kennedy was the writer, terrific writer who wrote most of them. And in the case of The Tall Tea, you got to mention Elmore Leonard. It's based on his story, although I understand that he wasn't so fond of the movie. But obviously, the Western genre was changing with the times, and in the 40s, you started to see a shift to noirish elements, darker emotions, heroes that were more complicated. In the films of Anthony Mann, for example, Jimmy Stewart personified this. It's the series that he made with Jimmy Stewart, a wonderful actor-director team, but with much larger budgets. Winchester 73, The Naked Spur, and pictures like that. The qualities that were so interesting and were so striking in these pictures was the spareness of it, the terseness, the starkness, the precision of the storytelling, the emotional precision as well. Austerity, the amazing frankness, and the wonderful relationships between the men, the strange camaraderie between, as I said, Randolph Scott and Richard Boone in The Tall Tea. These are elements that made everybody at that time, even though you're watching the film as a bottom half of a double bill, a B movie, it made it very different from the other Westerns that were run-of-the-mill Westerns at the time that were other B pictures. This had something unique to it. And also the nature of the way people moved in the frame. The starkness of the imagery lent itself to the impression that anytime anybody moved, it meant something. But I mean, even moved like their left hand to half a foot. And in a sense, I remember one person had mentioned to me that, well, yeah, it's a bullfight. So every movement means something, and it's all minimal. And I must say that younger people watching those films, when we saw them in the theater, even though we were used to, at times, lower budget B films, Westerns that had a certain sweep to them, that were more conventionally made, and/or the great Westerns of the great epic Westerns like Shane and that sort of thing. Here we knew there was something different going on. We had to pay attention, and it wasn't even a matter of having to pay attention. We were made to pay attention by the nature of the tension in the frame. And that had to do with, I think, his understanding of what each movement means. You tie together Boetticher and Scott, there's no doubt. But it's not really, I don't think, a necessity that an actor has to work with a certain director and vice versa. I mean, some directors go through an entire career working with different actors every time, and others just develop close collaborations. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of advantages to working that way with a close collaborator. You develop themes and ideas over time. You explore emotions, emotional states, and dilemmas, and really you, in a way, develop a common language. Scott and Boetticher seem to grow much more comfortable with each other on each new film. So there's a human interaction over time, and all these movies taken together. You know, you could look at it. You could look at them that way as one long, extended movie. The series of pictures they made at that time. And that doesn't mean it's the same picture. It means that it's variations thereof, of themes and ideas. One flows into the other, usually in my mind. So when you see The Tall Tea, you see 7 Men from Now, you see Comanche Station or Decision at Sundown, you're not watching the film. In my mind, it's not like watching the film. You're spending time with these people. You're spending time with, in a sense, an epic story of this one character, or Ride Lonesome, for example, with The Vengeance. You're in this world. It's like a world that's created. And it happened to be over a period of maybe 5 or 6 or 7 films. Like Val Lewton, the great producer, his productions, each film on its own is really quite unique, and some of them are excellent. But seen together, they take on another quality. They kind of communicate with each other, and seeing them all is a very, very special experience. And interestingly enough, like the Val Lewton pictures, the best of them, the Boetticher and Scott films were made at a certain point in time all together, in a pressurized time. They didn't make them over a period of 20 years, and it gave way to full expression. But here it was, working in a system where the films were released in a B status, and yet it was a very unique universe that was being created. And there's another factor in the Boetticher Scott films, that the shooting schedules were short. And these were like B films, 18 days each, I think. And the settings were actually in and around Lone Pine, California, quite stark and austere. The rocks are very smooth and round. And Boetticher and Brown both had a lot of experience in B pictures, and they obviously knew how to make something out of nothing, really, a virtue out of simplicity. But somehow Randolph Scott's face, his presence, appears to harmonize perfectly with the desert settings, the starkness of it. So I think those are principal factors when dealing with the Boetticher pictures.